Welcome to the seventh interview from marketing-interview.com. We have John Brezinsky as our guest today. He's director of B2B marketing at Babbel. Babbel is the world's leading solution for language training at work. Welcome, John. How are you doing?
Well, thank you very much. I'm doing well. How are you today?
Doing very well. Thank you. Thank you. John, why did you decide to go into marketing and how did all of this start?
That's a really fun question to start with. So my story is not unlike a lot of other people in the sense that I didn't go looking for marketing. Marketing found me. I actually got my start teaching English to adults. And when I was looking to make a change in my career, I originally applied for a couple of positions in sales, which I didn't get. But I made a good enough impression with at least one hiring manager that when they were looking for a marketing manager, they contacted me.
I understand. I understand. So, what was your professional development like?
Uh, Also, not unlike a lot of people, I learned very much on the job. The professional development was a matter of making a lot of mistakes and asking a lot of questions and learning from much more experienced and smarter people around me. It takes a long time to develop these kinds of skills, but if you ask questions and if you're willing to experiment and make mistakes, there's a lot you can learn.
I understand. I understand. I saw that you have went from so many companies to other companies. I saw that you worked at Pearson, at Cambridge University Press. Can you talk about that a little more? How your professional development was like in your career path?
Sure. So when I started at Pearson, I was the marketing manager for a specific segment. We were targeting language learning programs at universities in North America. And this was actually a really fun time to get into marketing. This would have been the mid 2000s when things like email marketing was new. Webinars were new. I actually heard someone you call it a web seminar. Or have you heard of this crazy new thing people are talking about? It's called search engine optimization. Everything was new. And so this was an exciting time when everything was changing because there were so many opportunities for new experiments. And I had the very good fortune to work with some colleagues who were also really curious to experiment. I remember, for example, the first time when Facebook allowed people who weren't university students to sign up for that service. And suddenly that was the thing to experiment with. But I think that what that's given me is a bit of perspective in the sense that things change all the time. Now it happens to be AI, but over the 17, 18 years that I've been doing this, a lot of the fundamentals have proven to be exactly the same. People are still people. You're still just trying to solve their problems. And those kinds of things, I don't suspect are going to change, at least not anytime soon.
That's true. And that's what I also would recommend any marketer to do. Just to focus on the fundamentals, on the human psychology, and then go from thenward to the different channels. Because if you focus on the different channels and find out what the marketing tactic is of 2017 and of 18 and 20 and then 25 and 27, you will end up with the knowledge that will just how can you say decrease, not decrease, they will vanish because the marketing tactics always change. But if you
Yes.
focus on the human psychology as a whole and then make your decisions from that on, then you have a marketing knowledge that will last forever, right?
Absolutely, and then you can, as long as you have an open mindset, then you can continue to evolve. Exactly the tactical implementation of strategy can and should change. And anytime there's something interesting that comes along, go experiment, have fun with it. And then figure out whether it's an appropriate channel for you. And it might not be now; it might be in the future. And to your point, in another couple of years, something else cool is going to come around.
Definitely, definitely. So, what has helped you the most to grow and develop yourself as a head of marketing?
So for me personally, it's been very much just asking questions. Um, uh, no matter what size company you work at, there are always going to be people who you can come to for ideas, or who might be experimenting with other things that you haven't played with. Or if you've got a difficult decision to make, maybe at the strategic level, talking to people and asking for input is always a good idea. This has really been one of the keys for me. I think another is constant experimentation. This is everything as simple as just A/B testing an email subject line. This is something that takes more time. If you're going to test or run active experiments, it means you have to build two sets of messaging, or two sets of designs, or two sets of something. But as often as you can do it, I highly recommend doing it. I've been doing this for a long time, but I still make a point of always trying experiments, because no matter how good my opinion is, it's only my opinion.
That's true.
And the facts will sometimes surprise you.
Definitely, definitely. Sometimes you think that the results are going to go into your favor and your thinking, but then you see it's not at all the case. And what I love to do as well is to test proven methods. So you find this method maybe online, or you find it from somebody who told you the method, and then just to test it out, to split test it with these other methods that are online, or your friends or your colleagues are telling you about, and then really find out what the best formula is for your own company, because what fits for one company doesn't have to fit for every company, right?
Sure. And different industries, different target personas are going to respond to different channels and different types of messaging in different ways.
So how are you currently training yourself and your team other from asking questions?
So I am not a huge fan of paying for a lot of professional development, because in my experience, at least, a lot of the courses, and frankly, most of the books, just aren't worth the time or even the money that you put into them. I am honestly a much bigger fan of fostering an environment of experimentation, of encouraging people to try, and of making it okay for some of these experiments to fail. I perhaps partly because this is the way that I learned the job. I'm a big fan of people learning by doing, and by talking to each other, and by just continually trying new things, seeing what works, and equally seeing what doesn't work. I think that we can only improve if we can point to both things that we've seen succeed and things that we've seen, well, perhaps not succeed.
Definitely, definitely. And I think it is true that most of the marketing courses and most of the books are not worth it. But for me personally, when I look at education, I love to read books, and I look for just the best books, the books with the best recommendations, and I only focus on those, right? For example, in positioning, there are thousands of books. But then I just look at the reviews on Amazon, for example, pick the top three, order them, try to filter out the best knowledge, and then that's it. Because if you want to read or take your time and then just focus on a book that might be not even worth your time, then you totally wasted it, right? So do you use social media to stay up to date?
Uh, this is partly a reflection of my age, but the answer is mostly no. I think LinkedIn is probably the only channel that I follow any other professionals out in the field. A lot of that having to do with, you mentioned positioning just now. I have a strong background in product marketing, and there are a number of people who post really interesting short form summaries or ideas for doing new things in product marketing. So LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, okay, okay. That means you watch short form content on LinkedIn, short videos, because I thought on LinkedIn is more of a
Ah,
platform that's made for
no, no,
text
no.
and photos.
Yeah, short text.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
yeah, videos. It's funny. If you can watch a video at 2x speed, that's usually okay. But even then, I can still read faster than a person can talk.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. So, do you mind if I ask you if you have a child?
I do. I have one teenage daughter.
Okay, okay, I understand. So, if your teenage daughter wanted to go into the same direction as you and wanted to become a head of marketing, what type of advice would you give her?
She is so much better at math than I am. I would say don't do it. You have a brilliant career ahead of you in finance or in the sciences. No, but to answer the question seriously, I think that and anyone who's young who thinks that a career in marketing might be interesting to them, I would suggest asking themselves some very serious questions. A big part of the job of marketing is actually not doing marketing. It's interactions with other stakeholders across the business. So if you enjoy talking with people who have completely different mindsets and completely different goals from your own goals. And if you don't mind the fact that sometimes they're going to come over and say, sales are down, it's marketing's fault, or renewals are down and it's marketing's fault. And as long as you can be prepared to work to foster good relationships with people, then yes, it's an excellent job. I would also recommend that the person ask themselves the honest question, how prepared are they to have some real failures from time to time? Because I do believe in experimentation in marketing. And so you've got to be prepared for the fact that some of those experiments will not be successful. If you're not okay with that, then this might not be the best career for you. Another serious question to ask yourself is how open are you to feedback on your own ideas? You might be brilliant, but there will always be lots of other people whose opinions have to be taken into account for a lot of marketing. And it may include people from other departments. So if you are the kind of person who would prefer to drive your own vision of things forward, then marketing might not be the best job for you. But if you do enjoy working with really different people from across different departments, if you do enjoy fostering good relationships with them and explaining how marketing works, if you do enjoy the challenges of setting up experiments and changing what you're doing, no matter what you thought beforehand, and if you can take feedback from multiple sources and make adjustments to something that was your idea, then you're going to love marketing. It's incredibly creative. It's incredibly fun. And it's a really challenging career, but I enjoy it. And I think that someone else would too.
Definitely. I think the point you made before was very good because marketing is actually like being a scientist. Most of the experience, even maybe 99% of your experiments, even if you start a new company, they will fail. But then you have one experiment, and if this one experiment is successful, then you maybe struck gold, and then you maybe
Yeah.
get to become a very big company if that experiment is going to be successful. But there's a lot of trial and error, so I can just say that that's the right way to view it. What what types of steps would you need to take to go into this direction to become head of marketing? What would you say would be the most important steps?
That's an interesting question. Okay. So even for relatively small companies, one thing that makes marketing different from a lot of the other functional groups is the variety of functions within marketing. Unlike customer success, where most CSMs have very similar jobs, unlike sales, where most reps have very similar jobs, in marketing, there are a number of different specializations. And becoming the department head requires an understanding of how all of those different specializations work together. You don't have to be an expert in each of them. That's likely impossible. I'm certainly not an expert in each of the specializations. But to use a language metaphor here, I speak intermediate level, all of them, which means that I have an understanding of how they can and should work together. And it also means that when I hire functional heads to lead those different specializations, I can help guide them towards good strategy and good tactical implementations. So that's a long way of saying my recommendation would be get a solid foundation in what each of the different areas of marketing entails. If that means that you take roles that require you to be a practitioner in those different areas, excellent. If it means that all you do is just work very closely with your colleagues, that's good enough too. But if the ultimate goal is to lead the function, then you need a solid background in all of the different areas that marketing entails.
Definitely, definitely. That's a good point. I think so too. Marketing combines each department of a company together and needs to communicate it, right? We have,
Yes.
for example, finances. We need to communicate good prices and good offers. Then we have research and development. We need to give input. What are the motivations and what are the pains of the dream customers? Then we have, for example, other areas, employ HR. How do you get good employees? So all of this combines makes marketing, and that's actually being like an entrepreneur in a company, right?
Well, for sure, and I think even more specifically, there's just the differences between content marketing and organic social versus paid search versus channel marketing versus field marketing. There are so many different, really highly specialized career paths. And I would recommend not specializing. I would recommend, in fact, the opposite, being a solid generalist, because I think that's more likely a key to getting to the top of the department.
That's true. That's true. What insights do you wish you had when you started out?
Be ready for everything to change in 2020. No, but seriously, I think I may not have known just how much change there is in the world back when I got started. But everything from it's every how many years does the world economy go into recession? But if it's the first time you're seeing it, it feels like the first time in the world. Well, no, these things happen. Or we were talking earlier about changes in technology and tactics that are available to marketing. Yeah, that's constant. The company that you work for could acquire another company. The company that you work for could be acquired by another company. The company you work for could go through a massive restructure, resulting in the layoff of several of your most respected colleagues or yourself. Change is an absolute constant. And I think that I might have been better prepared for the first round of change that I experienced if I had been, if I had known just how frequently things can change.
That's true. That's true. So, how was the recession in 2008, for example, for you?
A disaster. So this would have been relatively early in my career. I was working for Pearson, and we were, so again, the segment that I was targeting was universities for English language programs. And one thing that's generally true is that usually in a recession, people go and train up. They take a moment to improve their skills so that they can be better positioned to get a new job. But for the English language teaching market, the opposite happened. Enrollments just went down dramatically across the board. Both people who were already in the U.S. Who wanted to improve their English skills, or people who were coming from other countries, to study engineering, but they needed to improve their English first. Both of those groups, enrollment numbers just went dramatically down. And what that meant then was that suddenly the size of the market had shrunk dramatically, which further meant then that competition for every available classroom and every available university just increased dramatically. What we also had to take into account, of course, was this was an even bigger disaster for the schools themselves. If you don't have students, you can't pay instructors. So the layoffs in that space were also significant. So we had to think about ways that we could both, frankly, protect our bottom line, still continue to sell stuff, and try to beat our competitors, and at the same time be conscious of the fact that the people we're selling to are going through even more pain than we are. So that was a very difficult couple of years. We got through it, but no, thank you for asking. That was hard.
How did you get through it? What was your tactic to go through it?
Nothing special. I wish I could tell you, say, oh, we had a brilliant idea that no one had ever thought of before. But very traditional. Reduce costs as much as possible. I had previously traveled rather a lot. We all did, but that was cut off completely. Fortunately, webinars and other forms of digital marketing were starting to mature a little bit, so we could focus more of our energies on lower cost tactics, and then also really working to do as much as we could to help support our market, in the sense that, like I just said, many of them were losing jobs and the department heads were removing jobs. So we put out a campaign around professional development, around professional resiliency, and it was very much aimed at supporting the instructors and the educational institutions during a time that was incredibly difficult for them.
Understand. Understand. So we have just talked about the bad moments in the career. Let's focus on the good. Is there a moment in your career that you are particularly proud of?
Sure. So let me tell a story. So I joined a startup in the selling. It was B2B SaaS. That's really all that I know is B2B SaaS. And without getting too deep into the details, it was already a fairly saturated market. The major players were very well established, and frankly, they were quite good. There had already been one round of disruption with some startups that had forced a lot of change in the segment, but it wasn't the case that we were fighting dinosaurs who would be easy to take down. Frankly, the competition was strong. And when I came on as the head of marketing, but frankly, I was one of only two marketers. The first challenge was, how do we position this company in a highly saturated field? Fortunately, in my opinion, the basics of positioning are honestly very straightforward. There's only a few questions you have to ask. There's the circle of things that the market cares about. There's the circle of things that you have, and hopefully most of the things you have, the market also cares about, but it's not everything that you have. And then there's the circle of things that your competitors have. And then so you just focus on the things that the market cares about, you have, and your competitors don't have.
True.
Which, to be honest, for this startup was a very short list. Pretty much the only thing that we had was a wide variety of offerings. We were selling essentially data sets, and we had a really wide set of data to sell. But the website wasn't really talking about that. So and neither were the sales teams. So I led a process that went through those steps of talk to the market. What do they care about? Competitive analysis. What do all of those players have, and what is left for us to really focus on? And this led to completely redesigning the way that we positioned the entire product suite. Instead of selling a product, we focused on selling a wide offering of differentiated data sets, which we were still just selling the one thing, but talking about it differently suddenly made us seem like a much more sophisticated and competitive player in the space. And all sorts of marketing KPIs started improving. Basic things like bounce rates off the homepage, important things like demo requests, even more important things like sales qualified leads after the discovery calls, just from changing the way that we talked about the stuff that we sell. It was a lot of work, but it was successful, and I'm very proud of that one.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Where's this company today, if I may ask?
They were acquired, and then that company was acquired. So I'm afraid it no longer exists. I can't even show you the website.
Ah, okay, that's a bummer. That's a bummer. What has been your biggest challenge you have had to overcome?
Okay, so that's a fun one. I mean, we talked about the recession in '08. That was rough. The pandemic obviously was also hard. I think maybe the biggest challenge was a company I worked for just a couple of years ago was going through some significant financial challenges. Yeah, it's exactly what you're thinking. New sales were down, churn was up, which meant that while I was there, the company actually had to go through 2 rounds of restructuring, which meant that many of the departments were dramatically smaller. It also frankly meant that the engineering team was so small that really all that they could do was handle bug fixes and just keep the software running. So it meant that we were not going to be seeing significant new feature releases. We were not going to be seeing new product launches for sure. It also meant that complaints that came in from customers of, I wish this worked differently. I wish that worked differently. We weren't going to be making any changes. This was just the reality after cutting the company down that small. But at the same time, we still had sales goals to hit. And so with a reduced budget and a reduced team, I had to figure out a plan for continuing to attract leads and continuing to nurture those leads into people who would turn into new customers. This was very difficult, but as I have been many times, I was lucky in that the people who were around me also had the attitude of, well, okay, this is the challenge. I guess we have to figure out a solution. And I can't point to anything, again, dramatically different from what anyone else would have done in our situation. It was really very much coming back to basics. People respond positively to content that helps them do their jobs better. So we had to figure out ways to source that content, and we had to figure out ways to get that content out into the world. And while we certainly did not hit all of our KPIs along the way, we were able to turn things around, and we were able to keep morale high, even with a dramatically reduced staff.
How did you figure that out? Did you do keyword research? Were you asking customers directly? How did you figure out what they needed or what you should provide?
Right. So we already knew the segment quite well. And in fact, many of the people who worked at the company used to be part of the segment. Now we were selling MarTech, and so we knew the challenges. But we also didn't have budget or in-house resources to go out and create long-form ebook style in-depth analyses. And our competitors were doing that kind of stuff anyway. So even if we did do that, I didn't fully believe that we'd be able to stand out. But what we did have was huge amounts of data that our competitors did not have. And so what we did instead was look at what kind of benchmarking data was currently available out in the market. And we saw an opening. So essentially the message is, how well you're doing. If you're doing better this year than you were last year. But what do you know about the rest of your industry? Well, we compared the data sets for a couple hundred of the biggest players in your industry, in your country, in your language, so that you can compare your results to all of your competitors.
Mhm.
That was something that we could put out. And again, it was a differentiator for our company. So something that helps the target market do its job better, give them a benchmark to compare their own results against. That turned out to be a highly successful campaign that we ended up updating every 6 months or so.
Was it something that you gave out for free, or was it something they had to buy?
No, no, no. We're selling software. Sorry. Of course, they had to pay for it, but they had to pay for it with their email address and their job title.
Okay.
Uh, no, this was absolutely a lead generation tactic, but aimed at a very specific segment, so that we wanted to make sure that we were only getting the kinds of people who we cared about, and we had a fairly well put together set of email automation. Um, we had a fairly well developed email nurture. Plus, we had monthly webinars from internal experts anyway. So we were fairly confident that if we can acquire high quality leads, we can nurture them into marketing qualified leads.
What type of channels did you use to acquire those leads?
Right. So let me actually answer that question more broadly, because I know that there's a decent amount of debate in B2B marketing on marketing channels. Um, so every segment is a little bit different, but in my experience, broadly speaking, a lot of channels are the same. If your database is small, and if the content that you are providing is not tied to high volume keywords, then the only way that you can get more leads is by pushing people there, right?
Yeah.
So I see, generally speaking, two strong channels for pushing people towards your content. Paid media through third parties has been very good for me. You work with the niche media organizations or the trade associations in whatever your target segment is, and it's very simple pay to play. Like, you give them a PDF, or you give them a landing page with UTMs, they put an ad in their newsletter. The only people who would actually be interested in the stuff that we're producing are the people we care about. So that's one, is third parties.
One question. One question.
Yes.
By niche media, you mean magazines, for example, or blogs that are just in this niche, or what type of media is it, if I may ask?
Oh, sure. So, well, let me give you an example of the segment that we're currently going after. So, Babbel sells language software and live classes to corporations. And many of the people who are involved in these decisions work in human resources. So we would look for the trade associations for human resource professionals. They all have email newsletters. Or we would look to the websites and the online newsletters that are private companies for HR professionals. In the UK, there's an organization called HR Grapevine, for example. They have a very active database. They produce high quality stuff themselves, and so they're a good partner for Babbel. So at this previous company, we were working a different segment, but it's the same idea. Find the media outlets that are already targeting your segment, and they'll all sell you ads in their newsletters. They'll all sell you opportunities for webinars. That kind of third party lead gen is fairly common, and it's good. It's not free, that's for sure. And the expense also depends on the country. The U.S. tends to be far more expensive than Germany does. But that's one. The other one is I'm a big believer in LinkedIn. If you can get creative ads that are actually interesting to people, they will click on the ads. As long as you've got a message that gets their attention while they're scrolling, you've got a very good chance of driving leads that way.
I understand. How do you find these media companies? Do you just do research via Google and type in some keywords for it, or do you have another
Oh,
way to find them?
so yes, pick a segment. It could be performance marketing, or it could be I don't know, dentists, or it could be anything. Just Google the name of your segment and professional organization, or online newsletter, or webinars, and you'll get a bunch. Or for that matter, ask ChatGPT. They'll tell you 10. Two of them will be made up, but the other 8 will be good. So that's one. The other one is just talk to your market. That's an easy question to put in a survey. What email newsletters are you subscribed to get up-to-date information for your job? And they'll tell you.
I understand. That's a great one. And how do you prefer to pay them? Do you prefer to pay them via commission, per click, or just fixed price?
The models are all over the place. My preferred is there's a set fee with a minimum guaranteed number of leads. Not every place operates that way, but that's my preference. Yeah, I'll pay you this amount of money for this placement, this many ads, and usually they will overperform on the minimum number of leads, but I'm guaranteed at least 200, 400, 100, whatever it is.
How much? How much is it? For example, like I know probably it depends on the company, but what are the usual prices to do an ad like this?
You'll forgive me, that's a huge question. It can be relatively inexpensive. I've seen some German partners that gave us a minimum of 200 leads, and it only cost us a couple thousand euros. There are some very good American companies that you do a sponsored webinar, and of course you get all of the registrants to the webinar, but that'll cost you 20,000 euros. It can really be all over the place. It's also the case, generally speaking, that the more niche and the higher up in the hierarchy that you need to go. So, for example, if you only want directors, that's going to be expensive. They're very hard to get. But if you only want a very narrow segment, so not just performance marketers, but specifically marketers who just do paid search, or specifically marketers who do paid search for B2C companies in Western Europe, that's incredibly narrow, and so that'll be more expensive. But yeah, it could be, like I said, anything from a couple thousand up to 20,000.
I understand. So what you do is you just pay an email, you do the email for them, you describe the email, and then you send them to your landing page, right?
Oh, it varies. It varies. Sometimes they will want to host a PDF asset on their own webpage and deliver the contact information to you. Sometimes they'll want you to host it on your own website. Sometimes they design the ad for you. Sometimes they want you to design it. And the same, or sometimes you'll get a dedicated email. And sometimes they'll design it. Sometimes they'll ask you to design it. There's really a lot of variety in the industry. Or sometimes they'll say, either either you can do it or we can do it for you, but that costs more.
Understand. And what you give them is always free content, for example, via a PDF.
Sure.
Or like a webinar, for example. You
Mhm.
wouldn't direct them to a free demo, right?
So if the goal is lead generation, no. If you think of the whole marketing funnel, where at the very, very top, you just need a constant stream of new email addresses who you can contact, right? If that's where your problem is, if you have good conversion rates through the funnel, you just don't have enough leads, then what you need to do is give away as much as possible. So promise them an incredibly valuable asset, something that maybe they might be surprised they're getting for free. Give them something really, really good and ask for almost nothing. Ask for their first name, their business email address, and their country. Don't ask for their last name, because if they're giving you their business email address, 95% of the time, their last name is in there. Always force them to give you their business email address. I know there's a huge debate, so if any of your listeners or viewers want to argue with me on this point, I'll be happy to argue with them, but I am in huge favor of business email address, and you have to know the country. There are different laws around data protection depending on what part of the world the person's in, but that's it. Don't ask for anything else, and that's how you'll get the largest possible number of new leads. If that's not your issue, if you've got leads, but the issue is marketing qualified leads, then yeah, you might want to target people with more bottom of funnel kinds of offers, which might include watch a product video, which might include sign up for a free trial, which might include I don't know, maybe your product helps speed up websites, so sign up for a free diagnosis. Some kind of thing like that will be more likely to help drive qualified leads. At the very, very bottom, where it's an actual demo request, you'll get that, but that's, in my experience, that's going to be significantly harder to get from a third party who might never have heard of you. If they're just hearing about you for the first time, they're not going to want to talk to a salesperson. They don't even know what you do. So again, if you need more people in the database, give away something awesome. If your challenge is marketing qualified leads, then there are different approaches that you can take.
Definitely. And I see it in the marketing realm when marketers, for example, or just service type businesses try to get leads. They are also asking for the phone number. Why wouldn't you ask for the phone number as well?
Okay. This is an eternal debate between sales and marketing. And it also depends on country. In the US, for example, anytime that a salesperson is trying to call a prospect, that prospect will never, ever, ever answer the phone. If they get an unknown phone call, if they get a phone call coming through from an unknown number, it goes to voicemail, period. And they won't even listen to the voicemail. So it's a complete waste of time. However, in Germany, for example, it was surprising to this American, large number of people will pick up the phone when a salesperson calls. So in Germany, there's a decent reason to ask for the phone number. However, and here's the real challenge, is the more fields that you add to a form, the lower your conversion rate is going to be, period.
Definitely.
So salespeople want everything. They want first name, last name, job title, department, persona. What product are you currently using? What's your budget? They want everything, because of course they want everything. They need to be able to make qualification decisions, right? Marketing wants as little as possible because we just want you in the database.
That's true.
Now, all of that being said, if we're talking about a demo request form, it's much more appropriate to have far more fields on a demo request form. The goal here is not lead generation. The goal here is qualified lead generation. And so it's completely appropriate to include qualifying questions that can help your sales team make a better decision about whether this one is worth contacting or if it's just no good.
I would say this year I had a look at a lot of SaaS companies, and I saw that they don't offer free demos. Would you say that this type of business model or this type of marketing strategy could be successful? Or would you say that a SaaS business should always give a free demo?
Could you maybe give me a little context? What were they offering instead? Just a regular contact us button or something else?
It would be, they would have to talk to the sales team. So the barrier would be pretty high for somebody to get to know the company better.
We may have been speaking at slightly cross purposes. So yes, when I say a demo, yes, I mean talking with a person, not like a free trial.
Yeah, okay, I understand. So they weren't offering a free trial, but
Right.
they had some free
Sure.
demo, for example, as you said.
So the decision of whether or not to offer a free trial depends entirely on whether your software can be installed and used quickly and easily by one person, and whether that single person can understand it quickly and easily, and whether they can see a benefit quickly and easily.
Okay.
So it's a question of basically how complex is your software. And so I would argue that if it's software that can be installed quickly and easily and the user can see a benefit immediately, then absolutely offer a free trial. That's a great way to collect their contact information. You can ask for lots of contact information on a form like that, and to give them a positive experience. A lot of software, though, is just too complex.
I understand. But shouldn't software be developed so it's easy to use for users?
So complex is not necessarily the same thing as complicated, right? So you take something like, oh, I don't know, a CRM. So let's imagine that you're trying to compete with Salesforce. You might want to offer a free trial, but setting up a CRM, it's not complicated, but it's incredibly time consuming, and it needs to be connected to a lot of other pieces. So you could offer a free trial. I would wonder how valuable that would be to the prospect. Or imagine that you're selling, I don't know, something really complex like InfoSec software, right? Or multi-touch attribution software, where it needs to be it needs to touch so many different areas, and you need to have lawyers involved, you need to have security professionals involved, you need to make sure everything is GDPR compliant. Just getting it set up might not be difficult, but there's a lot of steps. And so you wouldn't want to go through all of that trouble for something that you're only going to be using for a month. Your legal team wouldn't want to go through that trouble. Your engineering teams wouldn't want to go through all of that trouble. So a free trial of something like that might not be appropriate. All of that being said, that means that you do need to be able to demonstrate the software. You can sometimes create sandboxes where it's already filled with dummy data, and so you're not. It's not a free trial in the sense of you're not really using it, but you are able to experience what the software is like.
That's a big one, and I think that's very important for customers just to see the interface and the usability hands-on. They don't want to watch videos, they want to click through it, even though if the application has no real use to them at the seconds, but they want to see how it actually works and maybe compare it to other free trials they have been using before. For example, I mean, Google Analytics is for free, right? But I think it's very cool that they offer some demo version of Google Analytics where you can see the insights of the Google Merchandise Store, if they're real or not, but you can actually analyze the data and then also show other people the data in order to educate them, because you don't, for example, want to show your clients' data or you don't want to show your own data, and then you can show other people data from the Google Merchandise Store. It's accessible to everybody, and that's beautiful to use. So I enjoyed that, for example, a lot. But it's true. It's true.
Sure.
Some applications don't make too much sense to have them as a free trial because the setup
No.
would be too big. That's true. Which marketing activities have proven to you particularly useful?
Okay, so let me answer that question in a couple of ways. The first thing is to just talk about the word useful. So, useful for what, right? So again, if we're thinking of a full marketing funnel, so there would be, we just talked about good tactics for attracting new leads, and we didn't even talk about some other things there, but there's also there, but there would be different tactics for nurturing them into qualified leads, and then different tactics for nurturing them through a sales process, and different tactics for continuing to keep them happy while they're customers and helping to prevent them from churning. But a couple of principles really stand out to me. And one is the one that we've touched on already, which is that people respond positively to high quality, top of funnel content, something that helps them do their job better. People respond positively to studies that show them things that they didn't know previously, right? Especially if it comes from a data set that only you have access to because of your software application. This can be incredibly useful. I mean, there's lots of companies who publish things like benchmark studies or meta-analyses based on their analysis of their own internal data sets. These are all really good for helping people improve the way that they do their jobs. People also like hearing from other people with similar jobs, but they like it if the job title is a little bit higher than theirs and it's from a famous company. So if you do a webinar, for example, or a blog post, for example, if it's written by someone they've never heard of, they will be less likely to read it than if it's written from someone who has a fancy job title at a huge company. And in fact, it does not matter who actually wrote it. The name will help attract attention. So that's another thing that I find to be generally true. Another thing that is incredibly effective throughout all of marketing is understanding your target segment, really understanding them through interviews, through surveys, through win-loss analysis, what's going on with them. Because at the end of the day, you are in fact trying to sell to a person and you're trying to solve a person's problems. So the better that you understand the person and the personality, what they typically go through, what their challenges typically are. If their boss yells at them, typically, why are they getting yelled at? If their boss is happy with them, typically, why is their boss happy? Really understanding these things beyond just the pain points that your software is solving for. Yeah. Understanding that and speaking to that in a real, authentic way makes a huge difference in the way that they perceive you. It's really easy to recognize when, like, the homepage of a website was written by a committee of people who don't know you versus one that was written by some insightful people who have spoken to someone like you and understand your problems.
That's true. That's true. And what are your, if we concentrate just on lead generation, because I think most companies would have the biggest amount of problems in lead generation. What would be your go-to strategies to acquire leads?
Okay, so we talked about partners. We talked about paid social. By the way, for B2B SaaS, I don't spend anything in Facebook or TikTok or Reddit or Twitter. All of the spend exclusively goes through LinkedIn. Every couple of years, the German social media company Zing tries to reinvent itself and come back as a good advertising partner. I have never seen real return from that either. So that's it for paid social. Paid search for sure. We were talking earlier about if you've got a piece of content for whom the search volume is relatively low on a monthly basis. But of course, if the real challenge is lead gen, then you're going to want to start with something that people are searching for, right? So do your keyword research and find something that you can really shine with. Organic search is by far one of the best long-term strategies for marketing. It takes time for your pages to start ranking, but if it's actually good content, no matter how many times Google changes its algorithm, if you are actually answering a question and providing value, then you will rank. And over the long term, the long-term performance of organic search is incredibly high. As long as you're producing solid stuff, good stuff that people want to read, and updating it, that is a highly effective long-term strategy. If you have an urgent need right now, you're going to have to pay. You're either paying LinkedIn or you're paying a media company, but you're going to have to pay for leads. But over the long term, the best results will come from organic search.
Understand. And you would say it would be best to focus for a small company without a huge domain ranking to focus on long tail keywords? Um, or what type of keywords would you recommend? Sort of probably long tail ads,
Oh,
or maybe
that's
chunk
also
in the middle.
that's also a huge question. So as someone who used to work for SEO software companies, I think my honest answer is, even if you're a small company, go and find a consultant. If you do not know organic search well yourself, go and pay a consultant just for the initial strategy session. Because building the initial strategy can be some of the most difficult parts if you don't know what you're doing. A lot of the tactical stuff, you can just Google how to do it. It's not that complicated. And if you're a small company, you're not going to be keeping up with all of Google's algorithm changes anyway. You're just going for the basics, right? But I would still recommend start, because even though it will take time to be successful, if it's good, then it will be successful, and then that will help. That'll help your entire site. But long tail versus the more difficult to rank for keywords. The answer that if I were an expert in SEO, the honest answer that I would give you would be it depends. I'm not an expert at SEO, and my answer is still it depends.
That's true. That's
So
true.
hire a consultant. It's worth it. You don't have to sign like a 12-month contract. Just do it for the single project.
Definitely. That's a good answer. So, what is your biggest challenge at the moment?
So I think right now, the biggest one is out there in the market that we serve. So traditionally, and so again, working for Babbel, the B2B side of the business, so we sell packages of solutions that include self-study language learning and live language learning classes, specifically for corporations. And the use cases that our prospects typically have include things like you're expanding into a new market, and so you need to raise the language proficiency among lots of employees in the company in the new market, or you have offices in a lot of different locations, and sure, you probably have one language that the company mostly does business in, but not everyone in the departments speaks that language equally well, so you want to raise their proficiency there. Or another one is for customer service, or another one is in factories, where a lot of the employees in traditional hands-on work might not speak the same language as their supervisors. But in the past, people used to a not small number of people bought our packages as just an employee benefit. So, hey, come work for us. We'll give you free access to Babbel, which is nice, but that isn't really a core business need. And so a challenge is raising awareness among managers and directors who probably notice that meetings are longer because their employees don't all speak the same language equally well, or there's misunderstanding over email and Slack because their employees don't all speak the same language equally well. But those directors aren't necessarily thinking of us. They're thinking about the problem, but they're not necessarily thinking of the possible solution. And the same goes in the industrial context, where a supervisor in a factory notices when an employee is doing something wrong, and they just told them yesterday how to do it, and they know, oh, it's because of the language, but they're also not thinking about solutions like ours. And these directors could be in any department across the organization, right? So it's easy for me to get messages in front of people who work in human resources or people who work in learning and development. Those are the nice job titles that are easy to target. We can speak their language. We understand their pain points very well. But if your other buyer could be anywhere in the company, it's difficult to find them. Again, I am fortunate enough to have really smart people working in marketing. So I'm sure this is a challenge that we'll be able to solve. But for now, that's a big one.
I understand. And do you also talk about these pain points immediately? For example, an ad that shows that this meeting didn't go well and therefore the company lost $100 million, or don't you like these negative approaches?
So no, I was not. We wouldn't run negative ads. I understand, generally speaking, but we do run ads, and we have a fairly comprehensive set of ads that we run, depending on an account's buying stage, and depending on the language, and depending on the use case. So sometimes, yes, when we get down to more middle of funnel and bottom of funnel kinds of ads, yes, we absolutely would speak to the use cases and speak to the pain. Much of the advertising is more top of funnel thought leadership kind of content.
I understand. I understand. So, what marketing decisions do you admire the most in today's corporate world?
When they actually give marketing a healthy budget is one. Uh, Trying to get budget is a challenge no matter where you are. I am always impressed when companies can create messages that are genuinely funny, because that's so hard to do. And it's so easy to get wrong. And because it's so hard to do and so easy to get wrong, I've never done it successfully, to be perfectly honest. Whenever I see something, especially if it's in my LinkedIn feed where I'm expecting business, but then something makes me laugh, I'm genuinely impressed. They had the courage to try to do that, and then they had the skill to make it work. This is impressive.
That's true. Do you know the marketer Sabri Subi?
I don't know.
He owns the 17 fastest company in Australia, and it's a marketing agency. And I subscribe to his email newsletter, and his messages are genuinely funny. But he goes very far with his humor. So for the German market, for example, it would probably go too far. I wouldn't put out these messages, to be honest with you. But for them, for the Australians, and probably for the US market, it's just fine.
Yeah.
But
No. The only thing that matters is what your target market thinks.
that's true. That's true. Which marketing activities are the biggest challenges in the corporate world today? Or let's rather put it like this: what do you think is the biggest mistake companies are currently making in marketing?
Biggest mistake. Honestly, I think most companies do marketing relatively well. I think that it's really easy to look at an ad and say, this company is doing a terrible job of marketing, when you don't know the other thousands of different iterations of ads that they have. You also don't know how much testing they've done. Perhaps the one that you didn't like is actually their top performing ad.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to criticize some of the marketing that people are doing. But I think at a decision level, when attribution is, sorry, but looking at the more strategic level, I think that one thing that companies can get wrong is to use single source attribution or single touch attribution. So especially in B2B, if you think about all of the different marketing touch points that happen to a prospect between the first time that they hear about you and the time that they sign a contract, they could be touched by organic search, paid search, organic social, paid social, email. There are a number of different channels and a number of different content types that can influence their becoming a new client of yours. And so if you do, for example, last touch attribution, so whatever the last channel was prior to the person converting to a contact, which, let's say, they saw an ad in LinkedIn, they didn't click, but they saw the ad. Let's say that they came to your website through paid search, and maybe they as a paid search, maybe they came to a blog post, but then a bit later, they came through organic search because now they know who you are, and this time they fill out a request to speak to sales. So, and then they turn into a client. And let's say the contract is, I don't know, we'll pick a number, 25,000 euros. So all 25,000 euros are now attributed only to organic search, when in fact, there were many, many marketing touch points along the way, both before they converted to a contact and after they converted to a contact. And if you want to really analyze the ROI of marketing, you have to use multi-touch attribution. You have to look at all of the channels together. That's the only way that you can have a true view of what's working and what isn't.
How do you analyze multi-touch attribution? Because I think it's pretty difficult to analyze it. For example, you cannot see that a person saw your profile on LinkedIn and stumbled upon you on LinkedIn, and then maybe Googled you, but didn't click on the ads on LinkedIn, so you cannot see that the person came from LinkedIn but Googled you. How can you? What's best way to measure it? What's the best tool to measure this?
So we are, if you are listening to this outside of the EU and you don't do business in the EU, so you don't care about GDPR, I'm going to go ahead and recommend the product that used to be known as Bizzable, that was acquired by Marketo and then acquired by Adobe, and is now called Adobe Marketo Measure. It's excellent. It's not cheap, but it's very, very good. If you need a GDPR compliant solution, just Google multi-touch attribution GDPR compliant, especially if 95, 99% of your marketing is online marketing. If you don't do trade shows, if you don't do in-person events, there are a lot of options that are GDPR compliant. The other option is to hire a really smart data engineer and do it all in-house. Now, to one of your other points, some touch points will always be anonymous, and you just have to accept that fact. You just don't know. I think the other thing to take into account is looking at marketing contribution at the account level, not the contact level, because more than one person can interact with your marketing touch points. But of these, say, 3 people, perhaps only one of them gets attached to the opportunity in your CRM, but marketing was influencing more than one person at that account. So multi-touch attribution, you either have to pay for software or hire an in-house data engineer to get it set up for you, and account level, not contact level.
Understand. That's a very good advice. Very good advice. Which marketing activities do you think will have the greatest opportunities in the future?
So it's boring to say AI, but I actually really think that give us another year, maybe 2 years, and I think that generative AI will be so tightly integrated into so many different areas of marketing that it's genuinely going to change things. I think that it means that content writers will stop being writers and become instead editors. I think it means that designers will suddenly be able to have beautiful images that are on brand, that they can use in the assets that they create. I think that it means that the chatbot on your website will not only be able to answer a prospect's questions correctly, but will be able to do it in your brand voice. And if you have a slightly different brand voice aimed at different prospects in different parts of the world, I think it'll do that too. And I think what that really means is that marketers will have even more data available to them to make even more sophisticated decisions about what they do. So this is probably the same kind of answer that a lot of people would give, but I think it's true. It's not there yet, but it's so close. It's scary how good it is now.
That's true.
It's going to be really interesting to see how good it is in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And yeah, this will be huge.
I think it's cool to see and nice to use right now. And I think the people who are using it, combining it with their own skill set, they are going to be even bigger and having more success, or will not fail in the future. But the people who are going to stay in their lane and don't adapt to AI, this will be a huge mistake for them in the future, right?
They will have a more challenging road ahead.
That's true, but at the same time, it scares me a little bit because marketing is one of the fields that can be replaced by AI in the future and in the close future. What do you think about that? That people in the future will lose their jobs, for example, because AI can replace them.
So I am less worried about AI replacing a person than I am about AI replacing a task. So one easy comparison is, think about digital spreadsheets and the way that we used to track accounts with actual pen and paper, before we had computers, before we had spreadsheets. The job didn't go away, but the job of physically writing the numbers and calculating them, that was given to a computer. And so what it meant then was that people started taking on more complex roles. And this is exactly the thing that I expect will happen in marketing. I don't think that suddenly all designers will be out of a job. People create design briefs and give them to humans, and the design briefs are terrible. No, people will not suddenly be great at writing design briefs for generative AI, even if you train them on prompt engineering. The average person just isn't very good at writing a design brief. So I don't think designers are going to lose their jobs. I do think that junior copywriters will need to use AI and learn to be editors quickly. I also think that a lot of the other content that gets created will likely get its start in a generative AI model of some kind. I think as long as they continue to invent stuff, what's the term that folks use? Hallucinate. As long as they continue to hallucinate, we will need human beings to check the facts. And we will need human beings to edit. Because I do think it's going to take some time for them to actually develop good brand voices. Right now, what comes out of AI sounds like it came out of AI, right? And the images look like they came out of AI. So I'm less worried about the people being laid off, but I do think that the skill sets will evolve. I think that people will be required to do more complex, more highly strategic tasks.
I understand. What is your vision for the future? What do you want to achieve in the future?
So my vision for the future is one where when a company has a challenge with communication at work, they don't just think, well, that's annoying. I guess we have to hire different people with different language skills. But that they are more aware of the fact that there are solutions out there where we can help raise the language proficiency and improve the communication across every department. We are right now, Babbel is growing really fast. We have a very strong presence in Germany, and we're growing fast in the US and the UK. There are a lot of exciting companies out there who are using our products, both the self-study software and the live classes, every day, every week. And I can see on the back end, people, the login trends, and we also are now able to see people's improvement in their language levels, and it's really exciting. So my vision for the future is one where, if the challenge at your company is communication, and if part of the reason for the communication issues are language related, think of us.
That's great. That's exciting to hear. Thank you, John, for taking this interview. I had a lot of fun interviewing you, and I wish you the best for the future.
Thanks very much. I had a great time. Bye.